World War I 19141918. World War I was like a family feud that turned into a neighborhood brawl. What began with an assassination in Sarajevo triggered a complex web of alliances that pulled the world's major powers into what became known as the Great War. The conflict marked the end of old-style warfare and the birth of modern combat. Cavalry charges gave way to machine guns, trenches stretched across continents, and new weapons like tanks, submarines, and chemical gas transformed battlefields into industrial killing zones. The romantic notion of war died in the mud of places like the Somme and Verdun. What makes this war particularly tragic was its combination of 19th century military thinking with 20th century technology. Generals sent waves of men against machine guns, resulting in unprecedented casualties. The war introduced aerial combat, with fragile biplanes dueling in the skies, and submarine warfare that threatened civilian shipping. The human cost was staggering, nearly 20 million dead and another 21 million wounded. But beyond the casualties, the war destroyed 4 empires, Ottoman, Austrian, Hungarian, German, and Russian, redrew the map of Europe and the Middle East, and planted the seeds for future conflicts, including World War II. Perhaps most significantly, the war shattered the optimistic worldview of the 19th century. The belief in inevitable human progress through science and reason was replaced by a more cynical understanding of human nature. The Treaty of Versailles created conditions that would haunt the world for decades to come. World War II 1945. Imagine a fire that starts in one room but quickly engulfs the entire house. This is how World War II began, with Nazi Germany's invasion of Poland in 1939, before spreading to consume almost the entire globe in the deadliest conflict in human history. The war emerged from the unresolved tensions of World War I and the Great Depression. Like a pressure cooker left unattended, these forces gave rise to extreme ideologies: Nazi fascism in Germany, imperial ambitions in Japan, and international power struggles that would reshape the world. The conflict introduced warfare on an unprecedented scale. New technologies transformed combat. Tanks rolled across continents, aircraft carriers dominated oceans, and bombers brought destruction to cities far from the front lines. But the war's darkest chapter was the Holocaust, where Nazi Germany systematically murdered 6 million Jews and millions of others, revealing humanity's capacity for industrialized genocide. The war created unlikely alliances. Democratic Britain and America joined forces with Communist Soviet Union against Nazi Germany, illustrating how common threats can unite even ideological opponents. The Pearl Harbor saw equally dramatic developments as Japan's empire-building ambitions led to Pearl Harbor and eventually to the first, and so far only, use of atomic weapons in warfare. The war's conclusion in 1945 reshaped global power structures. Europe's colonial empires began to crumble, the United States and Soviet Union emerged as global superpowers, and international institutions like the United Nations were created to prevent future conflicts. The world had learned the hard way that global cooperation was no longer optional. It was essential for survival.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
American Civil War 1861–1865. The American Civil War was more than a conflict between North and South. It was a struggle for the nation's soul. Like a family torn apart by irreconcilable differences, Americans fought against Americans in a conflict that would determine not just the future of slavery, but the very nature of the United States. What began as a constitutional dispute over states' rights became a crusade to end slavery and preserve the Union. The war transformed American society, accelerating industrialization in the North while devastating the South's plantation economy. It was the first modern war featuring innovations like railroads for troop transport, telegraph communications, and early submarine warfare. Human cost was unprecedented in American history. Over 600,000 soldiers died, more than in all other American wars combined up to that point. But beyond the battlefield deaths, the war revolutionized medicine with the development of field hospitals and surgical techniques, transformed the role of women in society, and led to significant advances in military technology. The war's outcome determined America's future course. The Union's victory preserved the United States as one nation, ended slavery, and set the stage for the country's emergence as a world power. However, it also left deep scars, particularly in the South, where Reconstruction's failures would lead to decades of racial segregation and economic struggles. This conflict continues to resonate in American culture, influencing debates about states' rights, racial justice, and national identity. It stands as a reminder that democracy is fragile and that societies must sometimes face terrible conflicts to resolve their deepest moral contradictions. Clear-headed 1815 1501 15. The Napoleonic Wars transformed Europe through one man's extraordinary ambition. Napoleon Bonaparte, rising from the chaos of the French Revolution, created an empire that would challenge the entire European order and introduce concepts of modern warfare that would influence military thinking for centuries. In fancy foremost sources, these wars weren't just about territory. They represented a clash between revolutionary ideas and the old monarchical order. Napoleon exported the French Revolution's principles across Europe, restructuring ancient kingdoms, introducing modern legal codes, and spreading nationalism that would later reshape the continent. What makes these wars particularly fascinating is their scale and innovation. Napoleon's Grande Armée introduced new military organizations and tactics and strategies. He perfected the corps system, allowing armies to move separately but fight together, and demonstrated the power of concentrated artillery. His campaigns became textbook examples of military strategy. The wars affected every aspect of European society. They spawned guerrilla warfare in Spain, united German states against French domination, and led to Russia's emergence as a major European power. The continental system, Napoleon's attempt to economically isolate Britain, changed international trade patterns and accelerated industrialization in some regions. The final defeat at Waterloo in 1815 led to the Congress of Vienna, which established a new international order aimed at preventing future European wars. This system would influence international relations until World War I, demonstrating how even failed empires can leave lasting legacies. Mongol Conquests 1206-1368. The Mongol conquests represent history's largest contiguous land empire, created by nomadic warriors who revolutionized warfare and connected East and West like never before. Under Genghis Khan and his successors, the Mongols built an empire stretching from Korea to Eastern Europe. What makes the Mongol conquests unique was their military innovation. They transformed the horse archer into history's most devastating military force, combining mobility, communication, and tactical flexibility in ways that wouldn't be seen again until the 20th century. Their army was a precision instrument that could destroy cities or absorb them intact, depending on their submission. The Mongols' impact went far beyond military conquest. They created an international postal system, facilitated trade along the Silk Road, and fostered cultural exchange between distant civilizations. Under their rule, a merchant could travel safely from Beijing to Baghdad, creating what historians call the Mongol Peace. Perhaps most surprisingly, the Mongols were often tolerant rulers who adopted and spread technologies, religious ideas, and cultural practices across their vast empire. They spread gunpowder technology, paper money, and diplomatic immunity, while also facilitating the exchange of scientific knowledge between East and West. The empire's size eventually led to its fragmentation, but its influence on trade routes, technology, and cultural exchange lasted long after its collapse. Cities that resisted were often completely destroyed, and some regions took centuries to recover from Mongol invasions. This Crusades 1. 0951-291. The Crusades were more than religious wars. They were cultural collisions that would shape relations between Christianity and Islam for centuries to come. These expeditions, launched by European Christians to reclaim the Holy Land from Muslim rule, mixed religious fervor with political ambition, economic opportunity, and cultural exchange. What began with Pope Urban II's call evolved into a series of military campaigns that would last 2 centuries. The First Crusade's success in capturing Jerusalem seemed miraculous to contemporaries, but holding these conquests proved far more difficult. The Crusader states that were established became islands of European feudal culture in a sea of Islamic civilization. The Crusades had profound and often unexpected consequences. They strengthened papal authority in Europe, developed banking systems to finance expeditions, and exposed Europeans to advanced Muslim and Byzantine civilizations. This contact led to the adoption of new technologies, foods, and ideas that would transform European society. However, the Crusades also left a legacy of mistrust between Christianity and Islam that continues to influence global relations today. The brutality of the Crusaders, particularly during the sack of Jerusalem in 1099, created deep wounds in the Muslim world's collective memory. These expeditions represent a crucial moment in human history when religious conviction mobilized massive military endeavors, leading to cultural exchanges that would forever change both East and West. 100 Years of War 1337-1453. Despite its name, this conflict actually lasted 116 years, shaping medieval Europe and transforming warfare forever. Like a complex chess game played out over generations, this struggle between England and France was about more than just territory. It was about power, identity, and the nature of monarchy itself. The war began over competing claims to the French throne, but evolved into something much more significant. It saw the rise of national identities, with both English and French people developing stronger senses of nationhood through their opposition to each other. The conflict introduced revolutionary military changes, most notably the English longbow, which proved devastating against French cavalry, and challenged traditional ideas about warfare and social class. What makes this war particularly fascinating is its cast of characters. Joan of Arc, a teenage peasant girl who led French armies to victory, emerged as one of history's most remarkable figures. The Black Prince of England earned his reputation as both a brilliant warrior and a model of chivalry. These personalities helped transform the war from a dynastic dispute into a legendary epic. The war's impact on society was profound. It accelerated the decline of feudalism as armies increasingly relied on paid soldiers rather than feudal obligations. The need to fund warfare led to new taxation systems and parliamentary developments. The English language replaced French in English courts and administration, marking a cultural separation between the two nations. Perhaps most significantly, the war ended the medieval notion of England's monarchs as rightful rulers of French territory, helping to establish the modern concept of nation-states with clear boundaries and distinct national identities. 30 Years' War 1618–1648. The 30 Years' War began as a religious conflict in the Holy Roman Empire but evolved into Europe's first truly international war. Like a fire that starts in one room and spreads throughout an entire neighborhood, this conflict eventually engulfed most of Europe in unprecedented devastation. What makes this war particularly significant is how it transformed from a Protestant Catholic struggle into a complex political conflict involving most European powers. It became a battleground where the Habsburg dynasty fought to maintain its dominance while other powers, particularly France and Sweden, sought to limit Habsburg power. The war introduced new methods of warfare and devastation. Armies were larger than ever before, and they lived off the land, causing widespread famine and destruction. Some regions of Germany lost up to half their population through war, disease, and starvation. The conflict saw the rise of military entrepreneurs like Wallenstein, who maintained private armies and changed the nature of warfare. The war's conclusion with the Peace of Westphalia in 1648 established principles that would shape international relations for centuries. It introduced concepts of state sovereignty and the balance of power that remain fundamental to international law today. The treaty also officially recognized Calvinism and established that rulers could no longer force their religion on their subjects. Roman-Persian Wars 92 BC 2 BC, imagine two heavyweight boxers fighting round after round for centuries. This was the nature of the Roman-Persian Wars, the longest-running conflict in ancient history. These wars between Rome and successive Persian empires shaped the ancient world for over 700 years. What makes these conflicts particularly fascinating is their cyclical nature. Neither side could ever achieve lasting dominance over the other, creating a balance of power that influenced everything from trade to culture. The frontier between these empires became a melting pot, where Greek, Roman, Persian, and Oriental influences merged and transformed each other. The wars featured some of history's most dramatic moments. Crassus's disaster at Carrhae, where Parthian horse archers destroyed Roman legions, Julian the Apostate's failed Persian expedition, and Shapur I's capture of Roman Emperor Valerian. These conflicts saw the development of new military techniques and technologies. As each side adapted to counter the other's strengths, the ongoing conflict had profound effects on both empires. It drained their resources, influenced their internal politics, and ultimately left them vulnerable to new threats. When Arab armies emerged from the desert in the 7th century, both empires were too exhausted from fighting each other to effectively resist. Peloponnesian War 43140 4 BC. The Peloponnesian War was ancient Greece's version of a Cold War turning hot, a devastating conflict between Athens and Sparta that transformed the Greek world. Like modern superpowers, these city-states led opposing alliances in a struggle that combined military conflict with ideological rivalry. This war wasn't just about military power, it was a clash between opposing ways of life. Democratic, naval-powered Athens faced off against oligarchic, militaristic Sparta. Their struggle would determine not just who would dominate Greece, but which social and political model would prevail. The historian Thucydides, who chronicled this war, provided insights about power, politics, and human nature that remain relevant today. His analysis of how fear, honor, and interest drive international relations continues to influence modern political thinking. The war featured innovative strategies including biological warfare — the Athenians accused the Spartans of poisoning wells — economic warfare, and sophisticated naval operations. The conflict's impact was profound and tragic. It ended Athens' golden age, weakened Greek civilization, and paved the way for the rise of Macedon under Philip II and Alexander the Great. The war demonstrated how internal division can be more dangerous than external threats, as Greek unity and culture never fully recovered. Like many great power conflicts, the Peloponnesian War shows how competition between political systems can escalate into devastating warfare, ultimately weakening all participants. Vietnam War 1-9-5-5-1-9-7-5. The Vietnam War represents one of history's most complex conflicts, where superpower ambitions collided with nationalist aspirations in a struggle that would redefine modern warfare and American society. What began as a colonial independence movement evolved into a Cold War battleground with global implications. This war challenged traditional military thinking. Despite overwhelming technological superiority, American forces struggled against an enemy that used guerrilla tactics, underground tunnel networks, and the dense jungle environment to their advantage. The conflict demonstrated that superior firepower doesn't guarantee victory when fighting against determined insurgents with strong popular support. The war's impact on American society was profound. Television coverage brought combat footage into living rooms for the first time, sparking unprecedented anti-war protests. The draft system raised questions about social equality as poor and minority Americans bore a disproportionate burden of service. The conflict created deep divisions in American society that continue to influence political debates today. For Vietnam, the war was a struggle for national independence and unification, though ideological factors complicated this basic aim. The conflict's aftermath reshaped Southeast Asia's political landscape and demonstrated that determination and strategic patience could overcome material disadvantages. The war's lessons about the limits of military power and the challenges of counterinsurgency warfare continue to influence military and political thinking today. It stands as a powerful reminder that warfare is ultimately about hearts and minds as much as territory and resources.